Good morning, everyone. MLA asked me to chair this session as a member of the task force and also as a commercial producer to help give some relevance to the producers in the audience. I noticed we're in Queensland and they have asked a merino producer to come up here and talk to you, so I'm not sure how well that'll go over. Having said that, being on the task force and being up here in Queensland, if you get a chance at morning tea or lunchtime, please come up and have a chat, especially if you're a producer. I also note that we've spent all morning talking about technology and data. For the technology-minded in the audience, I notice there's now a hashtag MLA Genetics, and there is actually people in the audience tweeting, so if you've got Twitter, get on there and have a look. So we're going to open up this section to questions. I assume there will be MLA staff running around with microphones, so if you've got questions, get their attention, put your hand up. I might just start by asking the panel. I noticed early on, Andrew put up on a graph that we're sitting at a very low bar. So for me as a commercial producer, I'm thinking, as an industry, are we a pass or a fail on this data area? And I'm assuming we're a fail. So I want to ask the panel, from a commercial producer's perspective, what does a pass mark look like? Let's say I'm a commercial farm, mainly commercial, with a little bit of small seed stock enterprise. What does a pass mark look like for me? Rod, I'll stop.
Well, to me, it'd look like a commercial farmer would see so much value in data that he would collect it and put it in. I mean, I think there's an assumption out there that commercial data is ratchet, it's so variable, it's poorly collected. No one can do it, and I think that's absolutely because we can't utilise it. So why do you waste your time? You put the other bird on and say, no, every bit of data you have, your MSA grading data, your growth data, your recording on fertility or whatever, is actually going to drive genetics and drive information I can use and drive what I get. Suddenly the data will be collected. You know, farmers are not silly, so I think we'll be successful when it's a normal thing and we actually collect data in it because it's used and utilise commercial data.
Yep. Any other comments?
Well,
Go ahead,
look, I tend to think there's almost a bit of a chicken and egg in terms of collecting data too. I think it'd be fair to say that historically there's been a set of people who've become our seed stock producers because they're prepared to collect the data and they can see the value in it. And there is also a mindset that says it's too hard, I'm not going to do it, and they tend to be our followers who trail behind. So it's not all about saying that the industry structure or the technology we've got out there has failed us. It's also the spread of people. There will always be an audience who are the followers, but where we have failed is being able to draw those people along.
Yeah, I was going to make a very similar point. I think in terms of industry pass, really I think the encouragement is to start to engage with data, start to think about how data can be used to look past the farm gate and up through the value chain to the consumer. Think about the kind of information that people are thinking about from a eating quality perspective. You know, where does your animal go when it leaves the property? What processes does it go through? And then what information do you need to grow better animals? I think closing that loop is going to be incredibly important. And I think just to follow on from Andrew's point as well, I think demanding more of the software and infrastructure organisations that are supplying you the tools and services that you need to run your businesses better. I think I'd personally argue that I think that's where the failure has been, that the industries support, the digital value chain industry supporting production and producers haven't hit the mark, and the bar is pretty low there as well in terms of getting data in and getting insights out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. So we've got a question in the audience. If I can just get you to say your name and perhaps an organisation in the front of your question. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Peter Marnie from Garanda, Theodore, Queensland. So we stated in the presentations about how much data there is in the MSA database, how much data we've got in terms of eating quality in Australia, how good the IRIS system is, our question here is, where's the bottleneck? You know, how come we can't use that data that is in prolific amounts? It's all related back to a NILS database. Where's the bottleneck? Why aren't we currently using that data?
I guess that one's probably a good one for me to start with.
I think so.
So there's a lot of it is around historic technical debt. And by technical debt, I mean a lot of the stuff that Andrew was talking about, we haven't really considered to date. So linking those data sets is incredibly difficult because the IDs, the metadata, and I guess the comparisons are really hard to make because all of the data has been collected differently. They've been set up under different structures. So actually linking those data sets together in the first place is very difficult to get value. The other one is around some of the legal structures that those data sets sit under. So copyright and licensing agreements. Historically, a lot of these data sets were developed and envisioned before the digital, I guess, the change in digital came along. So they haven't really been designed for this kind of use. And then finally, I think the other one has just been around focus. You know, to date, these pieces of information have been built up in silos, and it's only now that you know, organisations like the MLA, like RISAIR, like ICBF, are starting to think about how can this data be used differently to get close to the consumer. So I think to answer your question, you know, historically there hasn't been the industry push to use it, whereas now, you know, it's changing. And also I guess the last point as well is that some of the attitudes of industry bodies to opening this data up and to use data in different ways is also changing.
If you just wait for a microphone, there's one coming behind you.
Eric Simon from Simon Cattle Company. You've got all this data collected, and to use it for anything going forward, you know that it's good for eating quality and things like that, but it's got no linkage to any animals, breeds, where they've come from, anything. So it's historic data for an eating quality purpose, but for genetic evaluations and things like that going forward to be able to utilise it, it's going to be very limited in its use. There's no linkage to any of that a lot of that stuff going forward.
It's a little better than you think, but yeah, there's certainly some problems with that. Every animal we've ever killed for MLA research or MSA research has got DNA. Now, some of that was lost in the transfer around Pfizer and Genetic Solutions and so on, so it's not all there. We had a lot of CRC data, of course. We ate nearly 10,000 strip loins, but the downside of that is they were strip loins all grilled, all aged 14 days, so that didn't tell us anything about other cuts. We do have sets of data, of course, where we've got different amounts of history, but a whole lot of stuff's very commercial. If the genomic revolution, though, comes on, that suddenly could be a real opportunity because we can go back.
Yep, there's another question over here.
Yeah, Rick Turl, University of Adelaide, but it's not my point. It was made at the table by someone who didn't want to speak about it. In Europe, the Irish and the European governments pay you to put data into the system. In Australia, we tend to charge people to put data into the system. Just wondering what your thoughts on that might be.
Would you like to take that one?
There you go.
I mean, so I guess the point there is around the business case for data use. So within the Irish system, they do subsidise for data collection on animals, but they don't have the MSA eating quality data that we have available around our animals, which, as Rod will tell us in a minute, is worth considerably more than the subsidy value that is paid by the Irish system. So really, what we need to do is look at the whole of value chain performance increases that can be made by measuring and by collecting this data in the first place is actually a lot greater than what would probably be paid through a subsidy. So, you know, if you can increase the value of your animal by $250 by better understanding, you know, the value of cut to consumer or whatever, you know, the business outcomes are far greater than getting $50 per animal from the government.
Perhaps if I can add to that, Andrew, I think one of the things that you see in Ireland in particular, but you see it in Europe as well, is farmers there are limited by scale, and so they have very limited ability themselves to get any leverage over their own data. The number of animals they have, the ability to get paid differently for those is so limited that if anything is to be done to improve their situation, it has to be done at that industry level. So fortunately for them, the European community has said, it's all right, we know better, we'll make it work for you. Whereas here, the biggest beneficiaries of getting this right are the producers.
Yeah, the average herd size in Ireland is 17 cows. So, Hamish, at the back.
John Williams, Davies Research Centre, University of Adelaide. Just wanted to go back to the previous point very, very quickly, talking about the historic data. We can reconstruct pedigrees from the genomic data now very effectively, in fact more effectively than recorded pedigrees. So the fact that we have data recorded and no animal ID isn't actually a problem. We can create genomic breeding values from that, and I guess you'll hear more about that from Ben Hayes this afternoon.
Question over this side.
Jim Cross from Kingaroy, producer. Congratulations to the speakers so far this morning on the clarity of their presentations and the incentive to move forward. The one thing I was really taken by the Irish stuff and from commercial cattle and not necessarily from the stud cattle, and it really proves that there is a big gap out there in the database. To move this forward, the producers need to be able to access the feedback loop in a language and a way that they can understand. And as a suggestion I'd put forward now is that beef up forums can move into this data collection and this data use in the future.
I think I understand that. In terms of the Irish system, what they all get paid on Europe, you know, which is basically how big a bummer you got and how much fat. So EUROP for muscle and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for fat. So there's nothing in that whatsoever. There's zero relationship with how something eats, zero relationship with ultimate consumer value. So most of the feedback is really in the forms of, you know, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star bulls, and a number of indices. One for what they call suckler herds, which is basically a maternal index, and one for production, which is really heavily based on, you know, muscle and fat. So they have a hole, and they know they have a hole in eating quality, a little bit of objective data. But just that having that rating system on cows and on bulls, of course, is letting them sort their own herds out, and particularly their breeding herds out. And it doesn't matter whether your herd's got 3 Holstein cows, 2 Hereford Cross Angus and a couple of Belgian Blues, you get a common rating across all the progeny, you know, so you can actually use it. And then where they've their environmental subsidy is usually, or their farm payment, which is all about environment's bigger than the income from the cattle normally. So the commercial incentive for them to change is not as much as it is here, but where they've got really, really smart. I mean, I think the industry leaders and the government have said, well, it's all right, you've sat back for 30 years and enjoyed farming the government. Those days are over and those subsidies will reduce. So we've got to try to jerk the whole industry into actually being commercial, being to where we are as a matter of normal course. You know, we actually get paid for something we produce. So one of the really smart things, they want more data, individual dam data, stuff beyond what they have to record, like movements and so on. And they've said, well, you know, you can have you collect this data, we'll give you 70 pounds or whatever it is, but to get your 70 pounds, you can only use bulls in this top 2 category. And there's absolute catastrophic bloody panic there through the stud industry. All these big French Limousin bulls and so on that have been floating up there at the top of the sales because they won the ribbon in France have suddenly come up with 1 star. And some, backwoods bull that's never been heard of sitting here with a 5-star, and suddenly, to get my 70 quid, I've got to go and use him or one like him. So the market for mediocre bulls has gone to zero. The market for top-end semen has gone anything you like. And of course, whether you wanted to or not, whether you get paid or not, it's in your interest. The whole industry is making this giant leap forward. So they're using their subsidy pretty smartly in my book.
So there's some real smart stuff there, right, about actually thinking about how this applies to the commercial producers and how they can get that leverage.
Yeah,
it's really smart.
Righto, guys. We've just got time for one more question. We'll across here.
Good morning, everyone. Alf Collins from CBB at Marlborough. We analyse cattle and we record them in detail, and we put NILS tags in their ears, NLIS in your language. 2004, the NLIS system was launched to take us to the lead of the global beef market with traceback and rewards. I can't even find out who pinched me bloody cattle with NLIS. So I'm questioning, we've got to be very careful about how flaky are the promises. I've heard lots of promises. I just got one little agenda to live another 120 years to see a few more promises and then see some of them blossom. So I suppose it's a word of caution about how flaky our promises are, because to this point, if you produce under $1 a kilogram, you make a living. If you produce over $3 a kilogram, you starve. Somewhere there, when we reward cattlemen and they can produce $1 a kilogram, then we have some results. With traceback, we have all the systems, we're promised the systems. They exist, but where are they now is my question. Where is the efficacy of those systems? Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I think the opportunity we are now, right at the minute, you get paid for yield, more or less. You get paid for weight, as you rightly say, more kilograms, more money. You don't get paid very accurate for kilograms. Whether there's a kilogram of fat or a kilogram of bone or a kilogram of muscle is very poorly designed, but obviously we're on the edge of this giant technology revolution that can say precisely what was there, what was the fat, what was the bone, what was the muscle, and we're fortunate we're in a position where we can say pretty accurately just how each bit of that muscle ate. And it will never be a carcass, there is no such thing really. It's an unfortunate collection of meals that you have to buy the lot. You can't just buy the ones you want, but we can actually put an eating quality value on every bit of muscle in that animal, cooked however you want to cook it. Now, all our consumer data says that if we take 3-star meat, which is by definition good everyday quality from consumers, and we ask the consumer to put a value on that, and then they put a value on what would they pay for meat they've just eaten that was unsatisfactory, it's 50%. We say, what about the meat you said was better than every day? It's 50% higher. What about the meat you said was premium? It's 200%. So again, we think that these premiums, it's a nice steak, but price is everything. Price is almost nothing. It's just a component of value. So, if you want to buy petrol, go to a Bowser and make a decision on which hose you pick up. You want to get on an aeroplane and fly to Europe, make a choice, but you know what the choice is. You want to buy a bit of meat, you don't, but we now have the technology to do that. This is what we're offering. This is a meal we're offering. And this will be the best one you've ever had and it's worth a lot of money, or this one will be okay and it's worth less and we don't sell you something crook. So if you pull all that together, it's really something we call value-based marketing. If you get paid accurately for what you actually delivered in terms of quantity and quality and true value, suddenly there's a huge incentive there. Right at the minute, hiding in your herd or in the mobs of cattle you buy is probably a $300 or $400 difference just on the things you now measure, just growth rate and efficiency. But there's another many, many hundred sitting there in every herd in Australia that's all about getting access to the right data and getting paid for it.
Righto. Thank you, guys. I think I'll wind up.
Can I just make
one quick point?
One very quick point as well. So just to focus on the point about NIS and some of the other systems. One of the things that government and federal industry is very good at doing is making grand gestures and developing great big systems that work for a very short period of time. And going forward, one of the challenges to industry and one of the areas that we're specifically looking at through the MLA digital value chain strategy is around how do we deliver value fast, and then how do we iterate on that value over time. We're not looking to create large whole of industry platforms anymore. We're looking at how we can use technology to deliver value into industry very quickly. And I think that's going to bring around the kind of changes that you were talking about in terms of how do we maintain value from these systems on an ongoing basis.
All right, thank you. We'll just hand back over to Martin now for some housekeeping. We'd like to take the opportunity together with everyone to thank our speakers for this session. Thank you.